Moderator Jim Hemphill.
And please join me in welcoming the great Allison Anders.
Guys?
Wow, every time I watch that movie, I have to tell you, it makes me almost like achingly nostalgic for the early 90s independent film scene. And, just thinking about all the other movies that were coming out around the time he did this, things like, Clinton with Reservoir Dogs and Gregor Rocky with Living End and The Soup, all these things coming out. And I'm curious, for you at the time, did it feel like you were part of something special, or am I just romanticizing it, or,
92, I think we knew when we went to Sundance. I mean, everybody that you mentioned was there, was the class of 92. So when we were all at Sundance, and we all met there, except I had met Greg Rocky in Torino, Italy. And that was crazy because we were there with Border Radio, and he was there with Three Bewildered People in the Night. And I saw his poster, and I was like, oh my God, this looks like our movie. And I said, and he's from Los Angeles, because back then there was no scene. You didn't meet other filmmakers. I mean, in New York it was different. I think for Alex Rockwell, there was a different kind of connection that they all had. But for us on the West Coast, we didn't know each other was doing this stuff, So he was at USC, we were at UCLA, and so, but yeah, so 92, when Sundance happened, I think shortly after that, we kind of realized, oh, something's going on here, And I have to say, it was the critics. It's hard to believe the relationship that we had with the critics then, who were so useful, phenomenally useful at identifying movements. That's not up to an artist to do, that's up to critics to do, to identify what's going on and seeing trends, and God knows it's not part of the business to know that. They know something else altogether, but they don't know art movements, so there was this unsung hero of the American independence. I mean, there were all these different companies. Like, I think it was Monty Hellman and Live with that did Reservoir Dogs, and then for us it was Larry Estes, and he had this program at TriStar, and it was a negative pickup basically, so he just needed 3 names to put on the video box. Actually, I think he just needed 2 names. So it was a video pre-buy. So he'd give you $1 million. He actually gave me $1 million too for this. So that was pretty big back then. And that was pretty funny to get that money with the pitch that I did, because he brings me in with my producers and he says, well, Allison, I don't know what to say. The coverage on this script is you set us up for all these things and it doesn't happen. And I was like, so there was one other girl in the room, and she was like Larry's assistant. And I was like, well, I'm just making shit up. I'm like, well, for me, that's a woman's life. I mean, for a man, you set goals, and then if you get there, then that determines what you're going to do next. But for a woman, you set these goals, and then along the way, so many things happen that it almost doesn't matter when you get to the goal, because so much other shit has happened, good and bad and whatever. And so this girl's like nodding her head, and I was just kind of like, stay with me. Please. So I just am rambling on, and then finally I realized that they're just all staring at me, and I said, I'm sorry, I'm on a tangent here, and Larry Estes says, no, it's fine. I mean, what do I know about women? And it's like, okay, so you give me the budget, and you blah blah. Because my producers were like, okay, now our asses are gonna be thrown right out of here now. But we had the money then. Somehow that worked for Larry, this explanation. So he was a wonderful man. He really was, and he just left you alone. I mean, the one thing that he asked me to change was that he didn't like the scene with the mom, with the Javier's mom dancing. And he said, could you take that scene out? And I said, you know, by that time I had done so many test screenings on my own, you know, and I said, I've lost so many things out of this movie that I'm not precious about anything now. I said, but that consistently comes back as a favorite scene. So he says, okay, well, can you just change the music? So I changed the music. He liked that music for whatever reason, you know, so it was fine, you know, but really he stayed out of my way, you know, and.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine it was kind of interesting going into having trucks and name actors and all that stuff after Border Radio, because again, my vision of Border Radio is just that it's like you and Kurt and Dean and, you know, maybe one or two other people, if that.
Absolutely.
Running around doing everything.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned that you had to have, you know, a couple name actors in here. And I'm just curious, like, how did you get James Brolin? Because I love him in this movie. I think he's so perfect. Like, I can't imagine anybody else playing that role better.
That's Larry. Larry suggests, I mean, I'll never forget the moment that my producer said, now listen, Larry wants you to meet James Brolin. They want you to meet this actor for the part. And, you know, there were people that, I mean, I recently presented Paris, Texas in, it was a great scene, a trailer. And I just recently presented it in Lexington, Kentucky at the Harry Dean Stanton Film Festival that they have there. And now what did I say that?
Was Harry Dean one of the people who were thinking of?
Oh yes,
that
so
part?
Harry I was thinking of for the dad, but Harry had already done, he had done those parts, you know, he'd done the deadbeat dad and he had done the sweet dad and Pretty in Pink. And I just thought, this is not for him, or, you know, Sam Shepard, or any of these people you could think of at the time that you would immediately would come to your mind as who would be good. So I didn't have that dad, and so my producers are like, you know, just, you know, if you can just meet this guy that Larry wants you to meet, it's James Brolin. They were like, you don't have to cast him, just meet him. And I was like, James Brolin? Amityville Horror? Are you kidding me? Absolutely. You know, so, I mean, there was no question. I mean, and it was such I mean, I was watching him with all of you and just going, what a handsome man. He was so handsome. Even at that, you know, that beautiful age he was, you know, just so handsome. And, you know, he came here to be a filmmaker. And because he was so handsome, they kept putting him in movies, you know. And so it was amazing watching that scene with him, with Kim, you know. She was so great. She was a friend of Brooks. And Lee Hamilton. And just how he could talk to Dean about, I mean, he knew filmmaking so well. I mean, it was just amazing because he'd be like, Dean, am I here? Am I, you know, he could just look at the camera and know exactly where he was in the frame and how his behavior was going to be in relation to that, you know. And so, you know, I just learned a shit ton from just being with him. You know, he was wonderful. And I, not too long ago, saw his son, Josh, and he says, my dad always says that's his favorite part he ever did, you know, so it was really, you know, it was really wonderful having him. And that fulfilled Brooke and Jim, and then he got Ione too, so he had his 3 names for the video box, so he was pretty pleased, you know.
Yeah, well, cool. And I was obsessed with Say Anything. So like seeing Ione Skye in this movie after that, I was like, whoa, like that, it was just like totally different. I mean, was that by design or was it just kind of coincidence, or, you know, that you had all these people kind of doing something so different from what they had done before?
Well, this was the thing, and maybe this was part of this movement, because you will not see this much at all anymore, my friends. It's sad but true, is that people are so scared to try something different. And I was so lucky that Ione wanted to play a bad girl. You know, she wanted to twist that from Say Anything to being sort of this, you know, complicated girl that Trudy is. and, you know, antagonistic with her mother and all of that stuff. I mean, she was just, she was completely 100% willing and wanted that. And the same with Jim, you know, where it was like he wanted to do something, you know, he wasn't, he didn't want to be seen as Marcus, you know, he didn't want to just be limited to hotel, Marcus Welby, and all the stuff that we knew him in TV. And so that was really such a fascinating thing that we were able to get people to play against type. And I'm in the middle of casting right now, and I keep thinking like these days, and it's just non-existent. You know, it's just like nobody. There's not like, I mean, TV is kind of, well, I could go off on that forever. You know, they pay them so much money,
Yeah.
and they keep them forever, and then they're not interested in playing against type. And even sadder thing is, you know, people wanting to become brands and wanting to become lifestyle brands and stuff like that. It's just like, it's kind of maddening. So that when you see something like Drive My Car, you're like, oh, these are people that want to be actors. That's amazing. They just want to act. They don't want to be a lifestyle brand. It's weird. You know, so it's just a completely different world that we were in then. And just how lucky we were, you know, to have this time period. I mean, it's the same with each of us, I think, you know, from that era, you know, that we just got, we were in a, I mean, people were actors were very supportive of independent film, because they felt like they could do something, they could expand what they do, you know. And I don't know why that is. I honestly don't know. It's been a shock to me, actually, recently. You know, I mean, I think that we intuitively know it when we watch stuff now. You know, like, oh, and they try. You know, I mean, the ways that they surprise us, or you know, they play a part where they're, you know, like in a small town. You know, or they got some crazy accent, you know, it's local, or, you know, but it's not the same, you know, it's not the same at all. It's not like how they do it back then, you know, and and Christ in my heart, that was, you know, there were even Patsy Kensit, you know, doing something so completely different.
Like, so you're working on this memoir right now, about this time period, and I mean, is some of this, like, have you been thinking a lot more about all of this now than usual and reflecting on it for the book, or?
Boy, especially gas food lodging, because I went through so much to get this book. Like 20 years ago, this editor came to me, Walter Donahue, and we talked about doing a book, and he's at Faber and Faber, and he's just the most marvelous editor. He edits all the film books there that you all love, you know. So, and he actually worked on Paris, Texas too, which I've completely forgotten. I don't think that we met them, but he had some involvement with them on that. But yeah, so then a few years ago, he says, Allison, whatever happened to our book? You know, so God bless him for all this patience. So I was like, all right, let's do it. But it took a lot to get to the point. So the sample chapter, he says, why don't you write the sample chapter? It doesn't have to be the whole chapter, but just do it on gas food lodging. So it was crazy because I thought, you know, he says, you know, give me 5 or 10 pages. Well, 5 or 10 pages, it was like I hadn't even scratched the surface on 5 or 10 pages. So I realized it's, you know, with each thing, even watching all the trailers, you know, watching Mi Vida Loca trailers, I'm like going, you know, all these memories come back to me that's just crazy, you know. So, yeah, so definitely all of that goes into, you know, it all goes in the book. And it's, I titled it American Indie, my life through cinema's last generation. And the reason that I put it that way was because it doesn't mean that there's no cinema being made now, God knows. There's plenty of cinema. It's just that we were the last, it occurred to me, like, I was sitting with a friend who was a really big entertainment journalist, still is, but very different now. I mean, he was in print journalism then, and, you know, editor of Premier Magazine, and we were talking about how our careers completely changed with the digital age. Of course, for magazines, that was over. And for me, I said, you know, it's just, I said I was in the last generation that shot on film, cut on film, and projected our movies on film. I mean, we couldn't even fathom that something was gonna change, you know, and for better or worse, it has changed. But, you know, it is a interesting thing when you think about it like that. It's just a different deal, you know. It's a very different, and it's a different approach for sure. You know, first of all, Video Village. I mean, I love that Quentin has no Video Village, you know, and that is our right in the Directors Guild. A lot of directors don't know that, but you get to say if there's going to be a village or not. And, you know, that's just completely like screwed things so badly. I can't even begin to tell you. Or things that my daughter goes through where, you know, she says, people just put music in post. I tell them we can't afford this. Don't get the director all excited about this track when it's gonna be $100,000. You know, and I said, well, there's no way in hell we could have done that back then. When you're cutting on film, to put music in is a big drill. You know, you can't just throw things on there. I said, that's what happened. I started to realize that directing TV. I mean, when I'm directing TV, I don't get to put music in anyway. So, you know, it's fine with me, whatever, it's their show. But, you know, it's just kind of maddening, you know, how this happens. So, weird things like that have completely changed. The relationship with the script supervisor has completely changed. You know, because it used to be that you would be with the script supervisor right next to them. Well, they're on the damn computer now. You know, I mean, it's just it's a weird thing. Things have definitely changed on set and then in post as well. So it's.
Well, the good thing is here we're sort of frozen in time.
Yeah,
it's
I
like
know,
we're,
I love
you know,
that. I love that.
we're frozen in time. We're watching
Yeah.
everything on film, and in fact,
So good.
you know, I mean, I feel like we're barely scratching the surface, but I should probably wrap this up because we have another movie to watch, Grace of My Heart, which is, you know, one of my favorite movies of all time, and certainly one of my favorites of yours. Just out of curiosity, who here has never seen Grace of My Heart? All right, I am very envious of all of you. You're going to be, your lives will be, two hours from now, you're going to be happier people than you are right now. So do you have anything you want to say to set Grace of My Heart up for everybody?
Well, sure. I mean, one of the things that, I mean, Ileana and I met, I believe we met, actually, she came to Gas Food Lodging at Sundance. So when she was ready to make a film, Martin Scorsese, they were a couple at the time, and he had a new deal at Universal, and so he told her that he could, you know, if she wanted to make a movie, you know, she could develop something, and so she and I met up. Marcus Hugh, actually, who produced Greg Araka's movie. I think he produced The Living End and a couple of Greg Araka's movies, and he connected a woman, Ruth Charney, with me and then Ileana. And so you know, we went through a bunch of different scenarios, but one of the things that I'd always wanted to do when I was in film school was do something about the Shangri-Las, my favorite girl band. And the Brill Building, and there was a great book by Alan Batrock, a rock journalist, called just girl groups, and it was about, and there were all these fabulous pictures of the Brill Building and the songwriters in the Brill Building, and Ellie Greenwich and Jeff Barry and Carole King and Jerry Goffin, etc. And so I was always fascinated because they were kids, you know, writing these songs, and so I started thinking about Ileana as one of those songwriters, you know, and so you know, I felt like I could get kind of my girl group fix into the movie that way, and so Martin Scorsese really loved the idea because he had wanted to develop the Lieber and Stoller story and could never quite crack it. So he knew the Brill Building story very, very well. So it was great. I mean, so, you know, I started working on the script and really, you know, it took a while, but it started to come together, and Ileana and Matt have worked together on Gus Van Sant's To Die For. And then John Turturro was somebody I was really interested in working with, and Eric Stoltz had been a friend, and we had never worked together before, and so you know, it just kind of all came together. And then I hired Karen Rackman, who had done Quentin's movies, music supervisor, and I told her, I said, listen, I had this idea for the music, so, you know, I was thinking, and I made these lists. On one side I put Brill Building songwriters or songwriters of the era, and then on the other side I put people who were more currently newer songwriters. And I said, I was thinking, since it's about songwriting, maybe we do this, you know, we kind of go make marks through and put together some songwriting teams. And she just looked at my document, she went, and she says, oh my God, this is such a great idea. And she says, and I'm gonna kill you because it's gonna be so much work. So we put together these teams, and it was pretty amazing because, you know, she said, what about Bert and Elvis? And that was kind of an amazing thing. So we actually put them together for this movie for the first time. They had never met